Lesson 3, the passing away of Bapu. I think you know the meaning of the word passing away. Passing away means die, mara jawa. Writer Naryanchandra Rauth. You know, Bapu was the nickname of Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. This lesson is something sad one, because this lesson deals with Bapu's death and its reaction immediately after that in Delhi, where he was shot dead by some killer, and his name was Nathuram Godse. And Naryanchandra Rauth was a person who was somehow associated with this very person, though the association was not so intimate, but he was very much affected by the sad demise of Mahatma Gandhi, and the date of killing was 30th January 1948. On this dismal day, Naryanchandra Rauth was very much shocked, and she had written this on his to express his feeling, etc. Let us finish the introductory part of the lesson. Naryanchandra Rauth is one of the first female Indian writers in English to receive wide recognition. Her fiction deals with India's response to the crisis brought about by political changes. She won the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1986 for her novel Rich Like Us. Naryanchandra Rauth is one of the first female Indian writers in English. That is, he used to write in English, and he was a female Indian English writer, and his talent was recognized. That means he became very famous as a writer. Her fiction deals with India's response to the crisis brought about by political changes. She had written many novels or fictions, and in those novels she has recorded India's response to the crisis, to the crisis which was brought by political changes. There are various types of political activities in India before the attainment of independence in 1947, and most of his novels deals with the political changes or political reaction then. She won the Sahitya Akademi Award in 1986 for her novel Rich Like Us. Naryanchandra Rauth was a writer, female writer, who was awarded Sahitya Akademi Award in 1986. This year is important to me because in this year I appeared at the Madhyamik examination and I passed Madhyamik examination for her novel Rich Like Us. For which novel was Naryanchandra Rauth awarded the Nobel Prize, Sahitya Akademi Award? It was his novel Rich Like Us. The text and extract from Naryanchandra Rauth's memoir Prison and Chocolate Cake recounts the incidents following the death of Gandhi. It vividly describes not only the author's personal sense of loss, but also the collective grief on the entire nation at the passing day of Mahatma Gandhi. This paragraph shows the source of the lesson. The text has been extracted from Nayanthara Saigal's memoir, Prison and Chocolate Cake. Prison and Chocolate Cake is one of the books of Nayanthara Saigal's. It is memoir. Memoir means the book which records some memory of some person. These books or extract recounts, that means describe the incidents following the death of Gandhi. গান্ধীর মৃত্যুর পরে যে সমস্ত ঘটনা ঘটেছিল সেগুলোরই একটা রেকর্ড। ইট ভিভিডলি ডেসক্রাইবস নট অনলি দ্য অথর্স পার্সোনাল সেন্স অফ লস বাট অলসো দি কালেকটিভ গ্রিপ অফ দি এন্টায়ার নেশন। দিস টেক্সট vividly, that means clearly, describes not only the author's personal sense of loss. Author felt that he had a great loss in the death of Gandhiji. This was his personal feeling, but she has also described the collective grief, collective sorrow of the entire nation. সমগ্র দেশের মানুষের যে সমবেত দুঃখ, that has also been recorded by the writer. Mahatma Gandhi was a great political leader, we know, and his death no doubt created great sorrow among the people, at least for the time being, and this has been recorded here in this prose lesson and also in the writer's book Prison and Chocolate Cake. তাহলে আমরা দেখলাম কি নয়নতারা সাইগল একজন ফিমেল ইংলিশ রাইটার ছিলেন। তিনি তার লেখাগুলোর মধ্যে বা ফিকশনের মধ্যে পলিটিক্যাল ক্রাইসিসের ফলে যে সমস্ত প্রবলেম বা চেঞ্জ হতো সেগুলো সম্পর্কে রেকর্ড করেছেন। তিনি সাহিত্য একাডেমি অ্যাওয়ার্ড পেয়েছেন 1986-এ তার নভেল যার নাম হচ্ছে রিচ লাইক আসের জন্য। আর এই টেক্সটটা নেওয়া হয়েছে প্রিজন অ্যান্ড চকোলেট নামক তার একটা স্মৃতি স্মারক গ্রন্থ থেকে, এবং যেখানে তিনি গান্ধীজির মৃত্যুতে তার ব্যক্তিগত অনুভূতির কথা যেমন প্রকাশ করেছেন, তেমনিভাবে ভারতীয় জনগণের যে সমবেত দুঃখ তার কথাও তিনি বর্ণনা করেছেন এখানে। Let us proceed to the main text. Read the following. Unit 1. I was having tea at home on the evening of 30th January 1948 when I was called to Birla House by an urgent telephone. Gandhi had been shot dead on the way to a prayer meeting. I was numb with shock as I got into the car. I was having tea at home on the evening of 30th January 1948. আমি চা পান করছিলাম 1948 সালের 30শে জানুয়ারি সন্ধ্যাবেলায়। This mention of the date and time presents before us a vivid picture of the scene in which the writer was, and this is a great method of writing. When I was called to Birla House by an urgent telephone call, at that moment when she was drinking tea, an urgent telephone call came, and in that or by that telephone call he was called to the Birla House. Birla House is a famous house in Delhi. Gandhiji had been shot on his way to a prayer meeting. What happened? What information or news came over the telephone? The death news of Gandhi ji came, and it was reported that Gandhi ji had been shot dead on his way to a prayer meeting. প্রার্থনা সভায় যাওয়ার পথে তাকে কেউ গুলি করে মেরে দিয়েছে। This was the news. I was numb with shock as I got into the car. আমি ব্যথায় কষ্টে শোকে নিশ্চল হয়ে গেছিলাম। নাম মানে নিশ্চল হওয়া, মোশনলেস হয়ে যাওয়া, অবশ হয়ে যাওয়া। এবং সেই অবস্থাতে আমি গাড়িতে উঠলাম যাওয়ার জন্য। কোথায় যাচ্ছেন তিনি? না, হি ওয়াজ কল টু দ্য বিড়লা হাউস, বিড়লা হাউসে তিনি যাচ্ছেন এই সংবাদ পাওয়ার পরে। At the Birla house, Gandhiji's relatives and followers had gathered round his body. There was silence in the room as Gandhi breathed his last. Words of Bapuji's death had spread through Delhi like a flame fanned by wind. Sad groups of men and women had collected around Birla house. Out of every window one could see a brown blur of faces. They did not make a sound. There was an unnatural silence. It was as if time stood still for those few minutes. This is the second paragraph of our lesson. At the Birla house, Gandhiji's relatives and followers had gathered round his body. Gandhiji was shot dead. His dead body was kept in the Birla house, and there his relatives and followers, that means his kith and kin, K-I-T-H, kith and kin means relatives, and followers gathered around his body. This is quite natural that whenever a person is dead, his near and dear ones gather or collected around him. This was the scene of the Birla house then. There was silence in the room as Gandhiji breathed his last. No noise or hue and cry was in the room, as this was a very moment of sorrow to everyone, and Gandhiji breathed his last, and so there was, breathed his last is another form of expression for die. Died. Gandhiji, as Gandhiji died, there was total silence in the Birla house. Words of Bapuji's death had spread through Delhi like a flame fanned by wind. This sad news reached everywhere in the city of Delhi, and it has been compared with phenomena when a flame, when there is some sort of fire accident. The fire accident, there is a motion of there is a wind, and wind comes and helps to spread the fire rapidly. কোথাও আগুন লাগলে বাতাস সেখানে এমনিতেই গতিশীল হয়ে যায়, উইন্ড এসে বাতাস আগুনটাকে তাড়াতাড়ি ছড়িয়ে দেয়, সেটাকে তুলনা করা হচ্ছে এই ফ্লেম ফ্যান্ড বাই উইন্ড। This comparison has been made to make the matter clear that death news of Gandhiji spread everywhere, reached to everyone in the city of Delhi like the flame which is increased by wind. Sad groups of men and women had collected around Birla house. Hundreds of sad men and women gathered in and around the Birla house. This is quite natural, we know it. Out of every window one could see a brown blur of faces. In the neighboring houses, or in the houses of Delhi, people ব্লার ফেস, অনুজ্জ্বল মুখ দেখা যাচ্ছিল। দে ওয়ার লুকিং আউটসাইড বিকজ অফ দেয়ার সরো। দে ডিড নট মেক আ সাউন্ড, দে ওয়ার সাইলেন্ট। দেয়ার ওয়াজ নো হিউ অ্যান্ড ক্রাই। হিউ অ্যান্ড ক্রাই মিনস শোরগোল, শোরগোল ছিল না তাদের মনে, তাদের মধ্যে। দেয়ার ওয়াজ অ্যান আনন্যাচারাল সাইলেন্স। দেয়ার ওয়াজ এ সাইলেন্স হুইচ ওয়াজ নট ন্যাচারাল, which was not usually found. There was an unnatural silence. It was as if time stood still for those few minutes. The writer has beautifully described here with the line that the people around Gandhiji's dead body or around the places were so silent that time seemed to be standing there. Time was not moving. Time is always fitting. We know that time is always fitting. সময় সব সময় চলছে, but the people were so silent, they were so motionless and still that it seemed that they time did not move there. This is the second paragraph of the lesson. তাহলে আমরা এখানে কি দেখলাম, বিড়লা হাউসে গান্ধীজি রিলেটিভরা এবং অনুগামীরা তারা জমায়েত হয়েছিল, এবং লেখিকা সে বিড়লা হাউসেই গিয়েছিলেন যেমন তাকে বলা হয়েছিল, এবং ঘরের মধ্যে টোটাল সাইলেন্স, যেহেতু গান্ধীজির মারা গেছেন এবং সেই শোকে সবাই নিস্তব্ধ হয়ে আছে। কিন্তু গান্ধীজির মৃত্যু সংবাদটা সারা দিল্লিতে বায়ুতাড়িত অগ্নিশিখার মতো, ফ্লেম মিন্স অগ্নিশিখা, ছড়িয়ে পড়ল এবং দুঃখিত স্ত্রী পুরুষের দল বিড়লা হাউসের চারদিকে জমায়েত হয়েছিল। প্রত্যেকটা জানলা থেকে অস্পষ্ট মানুষের অস্পষ্ট মুখমণ্ডল, শোকার্ত মুখমণ্ডল দেখা যাচ্ছিল, এবং তারা কোনো শব্দ করছিল না, এবং এই নীরবতাটা কিন্তু অস্বাভাবিক ছিল। দি সাইলেন্স কজড বাই দ্য নিউজ অফ গান্ধীজি's death was an unnatural one. Delhi is a populous city, so there was it is quite natural that there would be some hue and cry, but the news of Gandhiji's death was so much shocking that everyone remained silent. এবং লেখিকা লাস্ট বাক্যটাতে বলছেন যে মনে হয় যেন সময় কয়েক মুহূর্তের জন্য সেখানে নিস্তব্ধ হয়ে গিয়েছিল। The people were too stunned to speak in the beginning. Later they clamored wildly, shouting and crying. They jostled one another in a stampede to break into the house. They calmed a little when it was announced that they would be allowed to see Gandhiji before the funeral. The people were too stunned to speak in the morning. This is a good sentence that has been used here to express the situation. The people were too stunned. Too stunned means too amazed, too surprised that they could not speak in the beginning. অতিরিক্ত দুঃখ হলে মানুষ হতভম্ব হয়ে যায়, they cannot express themselves in words. Later they clamored wildly, shouting and crying. তারপরে তারা কি করলো না, শোরগোল করলো। clamored means they demanded loudly, they demanded something loudly, that is expressed by the word clamored. Wildly, shouting and crying, they were shouting and crying, crying for something. That means they wanted to see the dead body of the great leader Mahatma Gandhi. They jostled one another in a stampede to break into the house. They calmed a little when it was announced that they would be allowed to see Gandhiji before the funeral. When the people were clamoring, they were shouting, they were crying, they were jostling মানে গুতোগুতি করা। Jostling actually means to push with one's elbow. Here the meaning has been given, forced one's way by pushing. When there is some gathering or lack of space, people push one another with their elbow, and that is called jostle. They jostled one another in a stampede to break into the house. They were so much thick, the gathering of people was so much thick that they jostled one another, and there seemed to be a stampede. Stampede means পদদলিত হয়ে যাওয়া। It sometimes happens during fair etc. When there is some sort of huge gathering, there is always the possibility of being stampede. Stampede মানে কিছু মানুষ পড়ে গিয়ে তারপরে অন্য মানুষরা চেপে গিয়ে একবারে পদদলিত করে মৃত্যু হয়, এরকম প্রায়ই মাঝে মাঝে ঘটে। সেটাকে বলে স্ট্যাম্পেড। স্ট্যাম্প দিয়ে যেমন আমরা প্রেস করি তেমনিভাবে মানুষকেও আর মানুষেরা ভয়ে হোক বা উত্তেজনায় হোক মারিয়ে যায়, সেটাকে বলেছে স্ট্যাম্পেড। বলতে এমন গুতোগুতি করছিল যে মনে হয় যেন তারা মানে পদদলিত হয়ে যাবে এবং ঘরের মধ্যে ঘরটা ভেঙে ঢুকে পড়বে। ইমাজিন দ্য সিন বিফোর বিড়লা হাউস, because scene created by the people who gathered to see Gandhiji's dead body. They calmed a little when it was announced that they would be allowed to see Gandhiji before the funeral. They calmed a little, তারা একটু শান্ত হলো। calm, CLM, calm. Calm is an adjective here. It has been also used as a verb. They calmed a little when it was announced that they would be allowed to see Gandhiji before the funeral. It was announced from the Birla house that people would be allowed to see Gandhiji before the funeral, and this announcement made the people somewhat calm. They became calm and quiet. তারা শান্ত হলো যখন ঘোষণা করা হলো যে গান্ধীজি ডেড বডি বা গান্ধীজিকে দেখতে দেওয়া হবে ফিউনিরাল বা অন্ত্যেষ্টিক্রিয়ার আগে। ফিউনিরাল মিন্স অন্ত্যেষ্টিক্রিয়া, দ্য burning or the burying of the dead body is called funeral, and other activities that are done for the peace of the soul of the dead person. মৃত ব্যক্তির শান্তির জন্য, আত্মার শান্তির জন্য পোড়ানো থেকে শুরু করে, কবর দেওয়া থেকে শুরু করে আর যে সমস্ত কাজগুলো করা হয় বিভিন্ন ধর্মে বিভিন্ন রকম নিয়ম অনুযায়ী, দ্যাট আর কল্ড ইন আ ওয়ার ফিউনিরাল। অন্ত্যেষ্টিক্রিয়ার আগে গান্ধীজিকে দেখতে দেওয়া হবে, এই ঘোষণা করার পরে কি হলো, লোকেরা একটু শান্ত হলো। তাহলে আমরা থার্ড প্যারাগ্রাফটা কি দেখলাম, যে পিপল কুড নট স্পিক অ্যাজ দে ওয়ার টু মাচ শকড। লোকেরা যেহেতু খুব দুঃখে বা শোকার্ত হয়েছিল, তারা প্রথমে কথা বলতে পারেনি, কিন্তু ইন কোর্স অফ টাইম দে কুড control their shock and they wanted to see Gandhiji, and they were crying, they were shouting. তারা চিৎকার করছিল, কাঁদছিল, তারা শোরগোল করছিল গান্ধীজিকে দেখার জন্য। এবং their eagerness for watching Gandhiji was so strong that they jostled each other. There was a কন্ডিশান দ্যাট মাইট লিড টু স্ট্যাম্পেড। এমন গুতোগুতি করছে যে পদদলিত হয়ে অন্য মানুষের মৃত্যু ঘটতে পারে, এমন পরিস্থিতি হয়েছিল। এবং যাই হোক, এরকম পরিস্থিতিতে গান্ধীজিকে দেখতে দেওয়া হবে তার অন্ত্যেষ্টিক্রিয়ার আগে, এই ঘোষণা হলো এবং তখন লোকেরা একটু শান্ত হলো। When one is faced with the shock of a loved one's death, one whimpers, "What will become of me now that he has left me?" This was surely the question uppermost in the mind of the mourning people. They looked like lost children. It was the question in many of our hearts as we sat, still shocked and unbelieving. We listened to the broadcast telling the people of India that their Bapu was no more. When one is faced with the shock of a loved one's death, one whimpers. Whimpers means make low crying noise. যখন কোনো ব্যক্তি তার কোনো প্রিয়জনের মৃত্যুর সম্মুখীন হয়, সে তখন কি করে না, নিচু স্বরে কাঁদতে থাকে। saying such words. The death of any near and dear ones is shocking to us, and then he cannot clamor in loud voice. They whimper, they cry in a low voice. So the authoress has used the word whimpers. Whimpers means make low crying noise. What will become of me now that he has left me? What will be the situation of me that in the situation in which he has left me? আমার কি হবে যেহেতু তিনি আমাকে ছেড়ে চলে গেলেন বা আমাদেরকে ছেড়ে চলে গেলেন। মেয়েরা বা যারা আবেগপ্রবণ হয় তারা এইভাবে ডাক ছেড়ে কাঁদতে থাকে এবং নিচু স্বরে হলেও এবং বলতে থাকে, দিস ইজ কোয়াইট ন্যাচারাল। দিস ওয়াজ শিওরলি দ্য কোশ্চেন আপারমোস্ট ইন দ্য মাইন্ড অফ দ্য মার্নিং পিপল। দিস ওয়াজ আ শিওর কোশ্চেন ইন দ্য মাইন্ড অফ দি মার্নিং পিপল। মার্নিং পিপল মিনস শোকার্ত জনগণ। দোজ পিপল হু ইজ মার্নিং আর কল মার্নিং পিপল। মার্ন মানে হচ্ছে টু এক্সপ্রেস সরো, টু এক্সপ্রেস শক আফটার সাচ হ্যাপেনিং, স্যাডফুল সরোফুল হ্যাপেনিং। তাহলে দিস ওয়াজ শিওরলি দ্য কোশ্চেন আপারমোস্ট ইন দ্য মাইন্ড অফ দ্য মার্নিং পিপল। তাহলে হোয়াট ওয়াজ দ্য শিওর কোশ্চেন ইন দ্য মাইন্ড অফ দি মার্নিং পিপল? হোয়াট উইল বিকাম অফ মি, অফ আস, আমাদের কি হবে, যেহেতু হি গান্ধীজি হ্যাড লেফট আস। দিস ওয়াজ দ্য আপারমোস্ট কোশ্চেন, সবচেয়ে বড় প্রশ্ন অ্যামং দ্য পিপল গ্যাদারিং দেয়ার। They looked like lost children. The mourning people looked like lost children. This is a good comparison to express the situation there. People are so much shocked that they were wandering here and there. They seemed to have no work, and they had been described here as lost children. It was the question in many of our hearts as we sat still shocked and unbelieving. The narrator or the author has expressed that this was also the question in our hearts. That means this was her own feeling also. She sat along with other persons. She was full of shock, and he could not believe that Gandhiji had been shot dead. গান্ধীজিকে যে গুলি করে মেরে ফেলা হয়েছে, গান্ধীজি ইজ নো মোর, দিস কোশ্চেন, দিস ফ্যাক্ট ওয়াজ হার্ড টু বিলিভ টু দেম, the narrator and her companions. We listen to the broadcast telling the people of India that their Bapu was no more. The narrator, the authoress and his companions are listening to the broadcast, that means radio. And in the radio it was being declared that Gandhiji was no more, that means Gandhiji is dead. This news was given to the people of India, as Gandhiji was a very famous leader, and his life had come to an end because of the shooting of some killer. This is the end of our Unit 1 of the lesson, the passing away of Bapu. In 4 paragraphs, the writer Naryanchandra Rauth has described the immediate effect of the killing of Gandhiji, and how people gathered at Birla House, where his dead body was kept for the time being, and how people demanded to enter the Birla House to see the dead body of Gandhiji. And the narrator and her companion all were also very much shocked. They were listening to the radio or the preaching of news, spreading of the news, broadcasting of the news of Gandhiji's death. And there was a burning question in their minds, what will be the future of India in the absence of Gandhiji, as he was a great leader. Okay,